This is part 2 of our video on creating a stored procedure that uses a cursor to insert records into a table. Specifically, to be able to show the gaps in the appointment schedule, be able to see what the availability is for our different counselors. We concluded the last video by realizing that our stored procedure so far is unable to identify the very last segment of break in a schedule. And so let's go ahead and modify our code to be able to handle that. All right, so to do that, we'll need to recreate the stored procedure. We'll go ahead and bring it back up to the point that we had it. So right here, after we've done all of our work on the inside loop, we've recorded all of the same, or identified all of the breaks that we did so far. And now, after we've finished that loop, we have one more to look at. And so we now need to calculate the length of the last break by subtracting the final appointment's end time from 5 o'clock p.m. on that day. And we'll set that up as our break duration. And so our variable break duration is going to get assigned to the day that we're looking at. So this v start date holds the day that we're currently working on at midnight, the very beginning of that day, plus 17 hours. So that'll be 5 o'clock p.m. And we will subtract from that our current break start. So at the very end of this loop, we read our last break start as being the end of the current appointment. And then, of course, we'll have to adjust that to minutes. And so now we'll need to display the information about that last break. We don't have a next appointment start time and duration, and so we won't include those. This one. We're ready then to close off the loops, or to close off the loops, close the stored procedure, and to execute that stored procedure. And let's go ahead and come back up here to the second. So now as you look at Abigail Smith, we can still see her 5-minute break that starts at 1:55. So that's there. But now we have a 125-minute, just over 2 hours, break that starts at 2:55, and that's right here. And so we've identified that particular break in her schedule as well. So at this point, we've identified all of the breaks, and now we just need to write them into a table. And so we'll go one more time through our stored procedure. Just as we've done before, and we'll get right to the point that we've printed that out to the screen, and now we're ready to take a look and see if we should be adding this record into our appointment, our list of availability. And so we don't really want to insert those 5-minute breaks, because that's smaller than we want to think about. And so we will say, listen, if our break duration is longer than 10 minutes, so up to 10 minutes, we're not going to include it in the schedule, but if it's longer than 10 minutes, we want to display it. And so if the break time is longer than 10 minutes, then we'll run an insert statement. So we have a table called available, and we're going to put in the counselor, the start time, and the duration. That's the values that the columns we're going to insert into. Now we'll specify the values that we're going to insert, and for that we'll use our local variables. So the current counselor we're looking at, when the break starts, and that break's duration. We're now ready to end the if statement and continue with our procedure the way that we had it before. And now just at the point where we've printed that very last break, we'll do a similar insert statement as well, only if that last break's duration is more than 10 minutes. Now we'll end off the loops, and we're ready to execute that create procedure statement. From here now, we're ready to take a look at running that procedure. So execute our scheduled procedure. And it runs again, but now it should have entered those records into the available table. So let's take a look at that table. So we'll select star from available, and we'll limit it just to the day that we're looking at for our example of our data. So just to June 2nd. So now let's take a look at that information graphically. And we can see that here for Abigail Smith, that she has 2 breaks, one that begins just before noon and goes to 1, and then one that begins just before 3 and goes to 5 p.m. And so this is the analogous set of the data to our appointment schedule. So if we go back to look at the appointments, we can see where all those appointments are scheduled, and now we can see when the gaps are. And so by having these in a table, the gaps in a table, they're much more queryable than they would be if they were not a table. And so that's what we set out to accomplish with this example. We created a stored procedure that used cursors to look at a set of data, figure out the gaps between the appointments, and then add those into a table called available.